So we're here on Daf Dalet Amud Beis, and the Gemara is going to give an answer to the question that was raised on the bottom of Daf Dalet Amud Aleph, namely, why does the Mishnah say she'eino yochel lalos beraglo, that he's parted from re'iyah? What's that coming to include after we have all the exclusions in the Mishnah? And we know, for example, that a chiger is excluded. If we look back at the Mishnah for just one moment, the Mishnah says, Hakol chayom b'riyah chutz, and on the list is a chiger. So what's the difference between a chiger and misha eni yochel lalos b'raglo? So the Gemara answers, in the name of Rava, we're now on the top of Daf Dalet Amud Beis, mefanki. These are mefunakim. Mefunakim means those who are very sensitive, and they can't go without shoes. And they are potter from re'iyah. Why are they excluded from re'iyah? The Gemara is going to derive this from a pasuk. They cannot go onto the arbayis because you're not allowed to walk on the arbayis without shoes. I'm sorry, you have to walk on the arbayis without shoes. And they can't do that. They're not capable of walking on the arbayis without shoes. They're mefunakim. Tichsiv, and the pasuk says at the beginning of Sefer Yeshayahu, Kisavo leroos panai mi bikesh zos mietchem remos chatzeroi. Hashem says, I don't want the people of that generation who are so far removed from me to come and show their faces on the three regalim. That's remos chatzeroi. I don't want that. And this bia is not considered lekavod. It's not something that is a glory or respect for God, but rather it's considered a bizayon. Romsim es chatzera. They are trampling on my courtyard. And when you walk with shoes, that's considered trampling. That's remisa. And mizos bietchem remos chatzeroi. Hashem says, I don't want remisa. I don't want you to come on the harbais with shoes on. So we're going to derive from this that you're not allowed to walk on the harbayis without shoes. I'm sorry, with shoes. Made the same mistake again. And therefore, someone who cannot go into the harbayis without shoes because he's a mefunaki, therefore he's not included in this mitzvah. Tana. And now we have a brisa with another category of someone who's exempt from re'iyah, and that is ha'orel. Rashi learns in many places in Shas that the word ha'orel is a case where this young boy's brothers died from Mila, probably what we call hemophilia. They cannot survive circumcision, and therefore he's an orel. Now we have a tameh, pturim min ha're'iyah. They can't be chayv in re'iyah, even as far as olas re'iyah al yidei shliach. This is what Rashi and Tosas emphasize. Surely an orel and a tameh are excluded from bringing the carbon, but let them at least send the carbon re'iyah with a shliach. No, the Bryce is telling us that even with a shliach, they're not out. So the Gemara says, Bishleim a tameh, I can understand why a tameh is excluded from re'iyah. And he is not obligated even to send his carbon re'iyah with a shliach, because the Torah says, and I'll read the entire passage. In Parashas Re'eh, it says, Ki im el hamakom asher yivcha Hashem l'shichno sidrishu vasa shama. So let's emphasize the words ubasa shama. And then it says immediately, Vavesem shama olosechem v'zivcheim. So we have now a smichus between ubasa shama and vavesa shama. Ubasa shama, you will come, and hevesa shama, you will bring the carbon. Ubasa shama vesa shama kol sheyechno bebia. If you can enter into the mikdash, yechno behava, you're included in vavesem shama, the obligation of bringing karbanos to the mikdash. But kol she'eino bebia, if you're not included in bia, you cannot come into the mikdash. Then eino bava, you don't even have to send your carbon with a shliach. You're completely excluded from this mitzvah. And a tameh is not included in bia because he's not allowed to enter into the azara. And therefore, by virtue of this hekesh of ubasa shama vevesa shama, we exclude the tameh from a chiyuv, even if he could theoretically send the carbon with a shliach, but he's not included in bia, and therefore he's not included in hava. He's not obligated at all, not even through a shliach. Now here we have a kasha of the Turi Even. The Turi Even wants to understand, why do I need this drasha in order to exclude a tummy from the chiyuv karban re'iyah? The chiyuv karban re'iyah is an auxiliary or an accompaniment to the ikar mitzvah, which is re'iyah. And I'll prove it to you. He says for the psukim, it says shalosh pan b'shana yirah kol zchurcha, and then afterwards it says v'lo yirah panai reikam. So he's got to bring the carbon only because he's obligated the mitzvah of re'iyah, and re'iyah only applies to someone who can come into the azar, and clearly a tummy cannot come in. So why do I need a pasuk to exclude him from the chiyuv carbon? He's excluded from the chiyuv carbon because he's not included in the ikar mitzvah of re'iyah. And he offers a couple of answers. Maybe we'll just study one of them. He says that we need this drasha for ptur carbon in the case of a kohen who contracted tumah, who's allowed to go into the azara to be makriv what's called a carbon tzibur based on tumah hutra b'tzibur. And we would have thought that since he's already allowed to go into the azara as a tameh, because this kohen is doing the avod of a carbon tzibur, we might as well obligate him in bringing his karbanos. And the answer is that this pasuk teaches me that he's not chayav to bring the karbanos. He's excluded because of the hekesh between bia and hava. One other answer that's offered by the Turi Even is that we need this drasha to pater up the tummy from a carbon re'iyah. If, let's say, he was already makayim the mitzvah of re'iyah on the first day of Yontif, he didn't yet bring his carbon, he became tummy on the second day of Yontif, and now he wants to bring his carbon. But what about Ela Arel Minola? Where do we see in these psukim a ptur from the mitzvah of re'iyah with regard to an Arel? And the Gemara answers, Hamani, this brisa that exempts an Arel from re'iyah reflects the shita of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva de marbe li Arel kit tameh. Rabbi Akiva has an equation between Arel and tameh. And therefore, just like a tameh is excluded from re'iyah, so too the Arel is excluded from re'iyah. This Sanya we learned in a brisa. And once again, I'm going to read the pasuk that doesn't appear here on the printed daf. Ish mizera aram, v'hu tzarua ozav b'kodashim lo yochel. And therefore, a tameh, like a zav or a tzarua, is excluded from kodshim. What kodshim are we referring to? This is a reference to truma. And a kohen who contracted tumah is enjoined from eating truma with a lav of v'hu tzarua ozav b'kodshim lo yochel. And this is all based on a Gemara Masechet Makos on Daf Yudal. Rabbi Akiva disagrees. It says in the pasuk ish leravos es ha'orel, to include the orel who has the same status, the same din as a tameh. And a Kohen Arel is now excluded from eating truma, just like a Kohen Tameh is enjoined from eating truma. According to Rabbi Akiva, Arel Harei Hu Kitame. We have an exact equation between an Arel and a Tameh, and therefore, just like a Tameh is excluded from the mitzvah of Re'iyah, so too is the Arel potter from Re'iyah. Tan Rabbanan, we learned in a brisa, Tameh potter min Re'iyah d'chsiv. Ubasa shama vesa shama kol sheyesh lo b'biyah yeshno b'hava, kol she'ena b'biyah ena b'hava. And therefore, since the tameh is not included in the mitzvah of hava, in the chiyuv carbon, he doesn't even have to bother sending it with a shliach. Rabbi Yochanan ben Davai Omer, In the name of Rabbi Yehuda, Suma Biachas Me'eno Potter Ben Ariya. This we've seen in the past. He's blind in one eye, and he's exempt from the mitzvah of Re'iyah. And Rabbi Yochanan ben Tavai is going to bring a proof to derive the conclusion that if he's blind in one eye, he's potter from Re'iyah. If he's blind in two eyes, that we derive from the pasuk Regalim. And Regalim tells me that he's potter from Re'iyah because he cannot climb up to the Azara with his feet without aid, without somebody helping him because he's blind. But in the case of someone who's blind with one eye, then Rabbi Yochanan ben Tavai, the name of Rabbi Yehuda, derives it Shenemar in the midst of Re'iyah. It says Shalosh Pam B'Shana Yirah Kol Zchurchas B'nei Adon Hashem. And the question is how to read the word Yerah. The way we have the Nekudos, Yerah means to be seen by Hashem. In other words, go into the Azara 3 times a year, all your Zcharim, so that Hashem will see you. Yerah, you will present yourself to Hashem. And that's the way we read the word Yerah. However, sometimes we have in the Torah words that are written in a certain way, and they're read in a different way. And we have here an example in which, even though based on the way we write it, it is Yerah, but nevertheless, we're going to read it in a different way. And we're going to read it as if it says Yirah. In other words, the male members of Klal Yisrael are in a situation where they have to see. What does this mean? We have a hekesh between Yerah and Yira. A hekesh between Re'iyas ha'adam es Hashem, which is Yira, L'Re'iyas Hashem es ha'adam, which is Yerah. So we're talking about God seeing man and man seeing God from the perspective of the Shechina in the Azor. What does this teach us? Kederech sheba liros, kach ba liros. And what does this mean? Ma ba liros, b'shtei einav. He has to show himself in front of Hashem. And by presenting himself to Hashem in the Azor, God will see him, and God sees b'shleimus. It's a perfect re'iyah. It's not an impaired re'iyah of one eye out of two eyes, as the pasuk says, "Einei Hashem Elokecha ba." So to leiros, when we're talking about going there and seeing what's going on, you need b'shtei einav, and therefore, a person who's blind in one eye, although he's not excluded from Hashem seeing him, which is liros, because that's b'shtei einayim. Leiros, which is the re'iyah shlema. Then liros is also b'shtei einayim. When man sees the Azara, he sees it with both his eyes. Rav Huna, and now we start a major Haggadah. This Haggadah is all about the Midas Hadin, the sad results of punishment when God meets out punishment with divine wrath. And in each case, an Amora sees a pasuk that describes our very, very dangerous, precarious situation of Klal Yisrael because of the Midas Hadin. And the Amora starts crying when he realizes what this pasuk means. Rav Huna kimatalai kra. When Rav Huna derech limudo, he was learning, he got to the following pasuk. And it says, Shalosh pamim b'shana yirah kol zchurchas pnei Adon Hashem. And we read the pasuk as if it was vocalized, it was benikud of yira. And we have a combination here of yira and yeroeh. Again, based on the nikud, we should say yeroeh, but we're going to read it with a ksiva of a different nikud, which is yira. Bachi. Why did Rav Huda break out with tears? Omar declared, Evet sherabo mitzapelo oso. In the original perfect plan, the Rav, the master of the Evet, was so enamored with the Evet, he was waiting and anticipating to see the Evet. God, so to speak, is waiting for the regel from one regel to the other so that he can see his Evet. And that's called Yeroeh. And now it's completely transformed. It's now a situation in which the Rav is Yisrachek Mimenu. He's going to command, man, don't even bother showing up. I don't want to see you. Tichsiv, Yeshayahu Hanavi, when he rebukes Klal Yisrael. And this is part of the Haftorah for Shabbos Parshas Chazon, right before Tisha B'Av. Ki Savo Le'Ros Panai Mid Bikesh Zos Bietchem Remotz Chatzera. The pasuk that we quoted earlier. Kadosh Baruch Hu is telling Bnei Yisrael that when they are coming to show their face in the Sholosh Regalim so that I, God, can see them, Mi Bikesh Bietchem Level. Who wants you to come and show yourself? Because you violate my commands. I don't consider it any kind of kavod when you show up during the regel. Remos chatzeron. You are trampling. You are undermining my kavod. It's bizayon. It's humiliating, so to speak, that you come lirmos es chatzeron. And the two extremes, from the one end, it's yeroeh, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu is waiting in anticipation for his beloved Eved to come into the Azorah to be seen. But on the other hand, no. Hashem says, Mi bikei zos b'yedchem remos chatzera. And that led Rav Huna to cry to tears. Rav Huna kimot elai kra bachi had another pasuk. In Dvarim Perek Chav Zayin it says, V'zavachta shlomim v'yachalta sham. When you bring a carbon in front of Hashem, a zevach shlomim, you should eat it there in Yerushalayim lifanav. What does that mean? Lifanav. Evet sherabo mitzape lechol al shulchanam. The mizbeach is considered like the shulchan of Hashem, and God is anticipating that the Eved, who's so beloved to his master, to God, is going to eat on the table of God. And now the Ava, the Rav, has such a love for his Eved, and now it's turned inside out. Yisrachek mimenu. He doesn't want the Eved to come and eat on his shulchan. Tichsiv, as it says over there in Yeshayahu Hanavi, Lama li rov zivchechem yomar Hashem. God speaks about rov zivchechem. It's a ribui. Why do I need these karbonos? And HaKadosh Baruch Hu is really coming with very strong rebuke. You left my Torah, you forsake me, then I don't want your zvachim, I don't want your karbonos anymore. So it's no longer like shlomim, where v'achalta sham l'fnei Hashem, when we eat at the shulchan of Hashem and God anticipates it. Rabbi Eliezer kimot elai krai bachi. Rabbi Lazar came to a different pasuk at the beginning of the Chumash of the Torah in Sefer Breishis in Perek Mem Hey, bachi, and he cried. Vayomer Yosef elachav ani Yosef oda v'chai v'lo yachlu echav lanos oso ki nivhalu mipanav. The brothers could not respond to the tochacha of Yosef when he asked if our father is still alive. They were nivalu mipanav. They were in total shock and distress. And Rabbi Lazar says, "Umat tochacha shel basar v'dam." Kach, if one person, in this case Yosef, who's a human being, he rebukes his friend on some sort of a criminal, a sin that would, an iniquity that was enacted towards him, and he's mavil him. He puts him in a state where he can't function. He can't think. He's in total disarray. He's shocked. Is kach. If that's what happens when a human being gives rebuke, when we will stand in judgment, liyasid lavo, and God will be mochiach us, each one individual on his pesha. How much more so we won't be able to answer to God. We won't have any excuses to patter ourselves up, and therefore Rabbi Lazar cried from the Emas Hadin liyasid lavo. Rabbi Lazar Kimotalai cried another pasuk, Bachi, and he cried. Shmuel Aleph Perikav Ches Vayomer Shmuel El Shaul Lama Hirgastani Lahalos Osi. Remember the story in Tanakh when Shaul was able to bring up Shaul. I'm sorry, when Shaul was able to bring up Shmuel through the conduit of a Yidoni, of a woman sorcerer, and Shaul is, so to speak, awakened through this Yidoni and rushed to see Shaul. And Shmuel cries out, Lama Hirgastani. Hirgastani means you have overwhelmed me with a sense of pachad, of fear. I thought that now is the day of judgment, and therefore I was overwhelmed by fear. And Rabbi Lazar says, look at Shmuel. Shmuel was a tzaddik. Shmuel did everything in line with the law, out of love of Hashem, love of his people. Nevertheless, Hayamis min adin, Hirgastani. We say in Hebrew, Hifchadetoti. Is anu alachas kama v'kama. How much more so do we who are not tzaddikim like Shmuel Hanavi have to fear the judgment? So the Gemara says, Shmuel Mai, what is Shmuel actually afraid of? What din is he afraid of? Tiksiv, that it says that after Shaul asks the Balas Ov, who does she see in front of her? Vatomer Aisha El Shaul Elohim Ra'isi Olim Min Haaretz. And this word is a description of a great man, and that's Shmuel. And the Gemara says, Olim, what's going on over here? Trei mashma in the plural. Did the Balas Ov bring up two people? And the answer is Chad Shmuel, the Idach, the Azal Shmuel, the Isi Lemoshe Badei. What a pella. Shmuel comes up from the dead, and he brings Moshe Rabbeinu with him. Why? Amar Le, Shmuel turns to Moshe and he says, Dilma chas v'shon ledina mitve'ina. Now that I'm being awoken by this Balas Ov from my kever, maybe I'm going to have to stand in judgment. And I need your help, Moshe Rabbeinu. He reaches out to Moshe. Why? The leka milsa de kasaf b'yoraisa, you can testify on my behalf that there's nothing that you wrote in the Torah of Hashem, below Kiyamtiyah, which I didn't implement and observe. I fulfilled all that's written in the Torah. There's nothing in the Torah that I didn't fulfill. And this is the Amos Hadin of Shmuel. How much more so, says Rabbi Lazar, do we have to suffer and experience Amos Hadin? We're not on the level of Shmuel. Rabbi Ami ki motalai kra bachi. Rabbi Ami, all the Amoraim about crybabies today, right? He got to a pasuk in Eicha, the third chapter of Eicha, Yitein bi'afar piu, ulai yesh tikva. Emphasize that word ulai. Yitein afar b'ficha is a reference, as Yirmiyahu Hanavi is lamenting the destruction of the bias, and he's describing what happened to the people at that moment. They were given afar. The afar here is a metaphor symbolizing Yisurim Gedolim. And after they bite the dust and they suffer all this agony, then Ulayesh Tikva. Omar Kule Hai Vi'ulai. So much Yisurim, and yet it's only Vi'ulai. How could that be? And that really scares the living daylights out of us. Such a midas hadin that even after Afar, Yitain Afar B'fiu, we still don't know for sure. Ulai, maybe Eish Tikfa. And this is why Rabbi Ami cried when he read that pasuk. Rabbi Ami Kimot Lai cried in another case, Bachi another pasuk. And now we're learning a pasuk in the Nevuah of Tzfanya for Bnei Yisrael, Bikshu Tzedek, Bakshu Tzedek, Bakshu Anova, Ulai Tisteru, or Tisasru, Biyom Af Hashem. You, the tzedek, which means the tzaddikim, should come in front of God on the day of divine wrath with supplications, with anova, with humility, and maybe, perhaps, tisteru, biyom af, maybe you'll save yourself from the divine wrath and you won't be punished. Amar Rabbi Ami declared, Kule Hai Vi'ulai, a person who is knowing b'tzedek, who be anova, and yet ulai, maybe is teru b'yom charon af. We're not even sure about it. And therefore he cried. Rabbi Asi ki moti lahaikra bachi. When Rabbi Asi came across the Nevuah of Amos, he cried. Amos declares, Sinu Ra, Evu Tov, Hatzigu Bishar Mishpat, Ulai Yechanan Hashem Elokei Tzvako Sheiris Yosef, Kule Hai Viulai. He did Sinas Ra, he hates the evil. He did Avas Tov. He was Matriach, very hard, B'kiyum HaMishpat. And yet it still is a suffix, it's a question whether or not he will receive chanina, grace from Hashem. No way that we can be absolutely sure about. Rav Yosef Kimatlai cried, he came to a pasuk and he cried, V'yesh nispeh below mishpat. All right, this is going to introduce a whole new dimension of the Agadata, and that's a discussion about death and the Malach HaMovis. The pasuk seems to indicate, if you read it just simple pshat, that yesh nisper, somebody will be destroyed, will die below mishpat, without any sin. What does that mean? He wasn't chayiv to die based on mishpat, and yet yesh nispa below mishpat. They'll be wiped out. So the Gemara now is going to analyze, how could it be that someone's life was taken away by the Malach HaMovis when that person didn't deserve to die? Because the Azablo Zimne is somebody who will be taken away from this world before his time has come. Everybody has a Zman Kotzuf Limei Chayav. In, says the Gemara, Ki ha de Rav Bibi Barabai Avishchicha Gabi Malach HaMovis. Rav Bibi Barabai always had discussions. He was on a very personal, one-to-one, buddy-buddy relationship with the Malach HaMovis. And the Malach HaMovis was always in the vicinity of Rav Bibi Bar Abaye, and the Malach would tell Rav Bibi Bar Abaye all sorts of things that happened to him in the past, and share with him stories about taking people's lives. Amalei Lishluche. The Malach HaMovis reports to Rav Bibi that on one occasion he told his second in command. So this is like the mafia, the Malach HaMovis does not put the person to death himself. He always sends the shliach. He'll let someone else do the dirty work. And he commands the shliach, Zil, icily bring me the following dead body. Miriam Megadla Seyar Nishay. Miriam, the hairstylist. Ta, the shliach made a mistake. The Azil icily, he took the life of Miriam Megadla Dardaki. And she was in charge of some sort of local gan. She was a ganenet. She was raising young infants. And this shliach of the Malchamavis made a mistake between one Miriam, who was meant to die, and that's the Megadla Seir Nishaya, and Miriam Megadla Dardaki. Amalei, so the Malchamavis says the shliach had no Miriam Megadla Seir Nishaya Amarti La. Amalei, the shliach says to Vihochi Ahadra, what should I do now? Should I bring her back to life? Maybe I should resurrect her from the dead. I mean, we learned from this that the Malchamavis also has the power to resurrect somebody from the dead. Or maybe only in this case because there was a mistake made and the life of someone innocent who wasn't meant to die was taken, so we can bring that person back to life and do a Tchias HaMesim. Yesh lahakshos ketzad yesh lo koch la'achiyos li'achar shenotlas nishmoso Tiretz Rabbeinu Vitzal Ashkenazi Shemikevon Shal Yidei Shenichvisa Parcha Nishmasa V'Gava Even Shadayin Lo Igia Zman Oli Potem Nolam Yochel LaHoshiv Es Nishmasa V'Kalis. We'll soon see that she got burned, and as a result, her neshama left her. But as long as it's within the time period that she's supposed to live, we can still bring her back to life. Amalei, so the Malchamavis says, no. Hol v'aisisa, since you already brought her and she's dead, you've already taken her neshama, you cannot bring back her neshama lehevi l'minyana. Let her be part of the count. Apparently there was a daily count of how many people would die on any particular day at the hands of the Malchamavis. And we want to fill the quota, so to speak, and she'll help us fill the quota. It says that the concept of minyan ha-mesim is derived in the Midrash from a pasuk in Koheles, dar holech v'dar ba. And the Midrash says, ein lecha b'chol yom v'yom she'ein noladim bo shishim ribuy, u'mesim bo shishim ribuy. I mean, again, during Corona, maybe this could happen. I don't know what it means. Al pi derech hapshat, but 600,000 lives are taken, and 600,000 new lives will replace them. And that's the pasuk in Koheles, dar holech v'dar ba. So we see we're dealing with numbers. So the Malchamavis now turns to the Shliach and he asks him the following question. I realize that once you've taken a life, we cannot revive her, but tell me the secret. Reveal to me, how were you able to take her neshama before her time? And the Shliach responded, I'll tell you the story as it took place. Havinakita misra biyada. This woman, by the name of Miriam Megadla Dardaki, was holding on to a very hot oud of a tanur, of an oven. Oud is a moat, a kind of a metal rod that's used to poke the hot coals. V'havas shagra, she was heating up the oven. And here we'll turn to Daf Hey. Umachriya tanura, and she was cleaning out the coals from the oven, the burnt coals, in order to prepare it for baking. Shakalta, she took the oud, this very hot rod, if we want to call it that, v'yanchata agava dekara, and unfortunately, she placed it down on top of her legs. I guess she was in a sitting position, I don't know. and kodacha, from the heat of that metal rod, her legs became burnt. I don't know if she had maybe a 3-degree burn, a very serious burn. And what happens in a person who's in that danger is mitoch kach isra mazla v'aisesa. Her mazel, every person has a mazel to try to protect them. But in this case, isra mazla, her mazel was diminished, so to speak. It was a deflated power. And that's called hura mazola. And once hura mazola, she was in my hands to take her for death and bring her to you. So we're up to Omer Le Rabbi Bibi Bar Abaye. The question is, maybe we should learn a little bit more here just to finish up what we started here about Rabbi Bibi Bar Abaye. Because you may recall that Rav Bibi Bar Abaye is telling us a story to prove and understand the pasuk Yesh Nispa below Mishpat. So Rav Bibi Bar Abaye says to the Malach HaMaves, Islechu Reshusa Lemevad Hachi? Do you really have the authority to kill someone before their time has come? Amalei, Malach HaMaves reports to Rav Bibi, V'lo ksiv, with a rhetorical question, doesn't the pasuk say V'yesh nispa below mishpat, meaning that people could die before they get to that time? Amalei, Rav Bibi responds to the Malach, V'lo ksiv, but what about the pasuk dar olech v'dar ba, which implies that every dar has to be mashlim shnonosam. In other words, each person in that generation has a certain amount of time to live on this world, and it's guaranteed by the pasuk dar holech v'dar ba, the kol dar tzarich lahashlim es shnosav haktsuvos lo b'terem kam b'mkom adar ba. Before the next generation can come and replace it, that first generation has to finish its quota of how many years it's supposed to live. So therefore, how can you take the life of someone before Zmano, before his time has come? No one will be able to fill in for his years because it's dar olechu dar ba. Omar, so the Malach HaMaves responds, and he says, Dura eno lahu ana. What I do is I pick up these neshamot and I keep them near me. And they will remain with me, says the Malach HaMaves, and they float around the entire universe ad molu lahu lidara, until the previous dar fills up its quota of years to live. And then once it's already filled up its quota, then the pasuk of dar olech v'dar ba has been fulfilled. The hadar, and after that, only after that, mashlimno le liduma. Then I give over the neshamos to that malach who's watching over the dead people, whose name is Duma. So ani mosers and neshamos lemalach hashomer al hamesim. At that point, I have the green light to hand over these neshamos over to that guardian malach whose name is Duma, who's the malach hashomer al hamesim. In other words, he's the one who takes the mason and replaces them with the new dar, and basically holds on to them, I guess, until Trias HaMesim. Amalei Rav Bibi says to Malach HaMaves, sof, Shanya Mayavdus. Wait a second. Okay, you figured it out in terms of dar holech v'dar ba, one dar and then another dar. You held on to the neshamos until those would complete. But what about that person whose life has not come to fruition and they haven't lived out the zman, the shnosav shehuktu lo li'adam? How can you cut that down? Omar, the Malach HaMaves response to Bibi Ika Turmi Rabbanon Imavir b'milei mosifna lehu lei. The Havya Chilufe. If there's a Talmud Chacham who can be classified as Mavir al Midosov, meaning when people anger him, he doesn't lash out at them, he overcomes any enmity feelings towards them, then I will give that Surmi Rabbanan who's Mavir al Midosov a Hosafa. Right? He was meant to live 70 years. Now I'm going to allow him and extend his life till 80 years. And the Talmud Chacham now will live those years as a substitute for the person who was cut down prematurely, whose life was taken before his man. And the Gemara in Yevamos has a machlok shin Chacham Rabbi Akiva. Is it possible to add years to a person's life? Rabbi Akiva holds you can't add, when a person gets a certain zman kotzuv, that's it. However, the Chachamim hold that sometimes you could add years to a person's life. So our sugya seems to reflect the sheet of the Chachamim and not Rabbi Akiva. And Tosfos wants to reconcile our sugya with Rabbi Akiva. Even Rabbi Akiva holds that we don't add to a person's years. He would concede that if somebody else has years that haven't been used up, so to speak, we can take those years and add it and transfer it over to another person. Now, does the Malach HaMavos indicate here that he has the power to add years to a person more than the years that was decreed as kotzer? It would seem for this Gemara that the answer is a robust yes. How does a malach have the koach to add years to a person? It's a pella. How could the Malach HaMavos add to a person extra years to his life? Because God sent the Malach HaMavos to bring this neshama back, and he has to fulfill the will of God. And he's saying, no, I'm going to play games over here. I'm going to juggle this person's years. I'm going to transfer over to this person. And the Gra writes, "Ein kavanas malach hamavos bo sofas hashonim litovas hatzadik, ki be'emes malach hamavos sono." We think that the malach hamavos is being so magnanimous, adding years to the tzaddik. No. The malach hamavos hates the tzaddik, as the pasuk in Tehillim says, "Sofer roshel tzaddik umevakesh lehamisa." But rather, the kavanah of the malach here is for the deficit of the tzaddik. Because what happens is the Malach HaMavos realizes that most of the years of the life of the tzaddik have already passed based on the original Zman Kotzuv. And the Gemara tells us in the Masechet Yomi, so therefore it's in the favor of the Malach HaMavos' project or his goal to add years to the tzaddik's life so that he doesn't have Avru Rov Shnosa, and therefore the Yetzer Hara and the Satan could be machshil. Okay, then. So this is where we're going to stop here on the top of Daf Hey Amud Aleph with Rabbi Yochanan approximately 10 lines down from the top of the oath. Okay, then I wish you all a great week. Thank you so much.